Discovering a childhood fear about nail cutting was rooted in trauma. For as long as I can recall, cutting my fingernails and toenails has been something I've only ever done while in the bath or shower. My husband has always found this peculiar and has often inquired about it. My consistent response was that attempting to cut them outside of water resulted in my nails bleeding and feeling incredibly sore. This was a deeply ingrained memory from my childhood, something I accepted as a personal oddity, especially after seeing my husband trim his nails effortlessly whenever he pleased, seemingly without any negative consequences. I genuinely believed my body was somehow different. Things began to shift when I was pregnant. As my pregnancy progressed, reaching my feet became impossible. My husband kindly offered to help with my toenails. He didn't perform this task in the shower. He did it while I was simply sitting on the bed. To my surprise, my toenails didn't become sore, and there was no bleeding whatsoever. This experience struck me as profoundly strange and contradictory to my lifelong understanding. The inconsistency bothered me greatly. It would pop into my head periodically, prompting moments of quiet contemplation. Eventually, the persistent question led me to search online for information about how to properly cut nails. While reading, fragmented memories began to surface and coalesce. I started recalling vivid images of my mother pinning me down onto a bed, literally sitting on my small body while I screamed and struggled, protesting that it hurt. Through this process of research and the return of these suppressed memories, I finally understood. Nails don't typically bleed or feel sore from a normal trim. They become painful if you accidentally cut into the surrounding skin, or if they are clipped back excessively short. My perceived difference wasn't a physical anomaly, it was a direct result of my mother's actions. She would try to cut my nails as short as humanly possible, which inevitably led to soreness and discomfort. This pain in turn caused my younger self to believe that having my nails cut was an inherently painful process, leading me to resist and fight against it. My struggle would escalate her frustration, making her angry. Her impatience and my inability to hold still under duress meant that skin was frequently caught and cut because she simply forced the process through regardless of my distress. The theory I developed around needing water likely originated from one instance where I managed to get hold of clippers while in the bath and successfully trimmed my nails myself without pain. I must have assumed this environmental factor was the crucial element, and somewhere along the way, the actual traumatic origin of the pain was forgotten or buried. Coming to this realization feels heavy and unsettling. It's difficult to process how a simple, mundane task like nail cutting became intertwined with such a distressing childhood experience and shaped a belief I carried for decades. Sharing this feels necessary even without a specific question or goal, just to acknowledge the weight of it. That personal oddity turns out to be straight up abuse. This kind of story is why we're here, uncovering these patterns. If you relate, don't forget to like and subscribe. My daughter's loose tooth and confronting childhood fears. My 6-year-old daughter recently had a tooth that was incredibly loose. We're talking hanging by a single thread, angled 90 degrees, so wobbly it caused her pain just by existing. I became genuinely worried she might accidentally swallow it during a meal. It's worth mentioning that through a series of fortuitous events and a bit of dental intervention, we had somehow avoided the necessity of actually pulling a tooth out of her head ourselves up until this point. Her first couple of teeth came out while she was at daycare. A few others were extracted during necessary dental procedures, and the most recent one simply popped out while she was enjoying a gummy sucker. This was the first time we faced a situation where a tooth needed manual extraction at home. She started complaining that it hurt constantly. I tried to explain to her that the pain was because it was so loose and was ready to come out. Hearing this, she immediately began to cry. I felt completely unsure of how to proceed. I knew logically the tooth had to come out, but I had no desire to force the issue if she wasn't emotionally prepared. The last thing I wanted was to frighten or traumatize her over something so seemingly minor, yet it felt almost absurd. It was just a small baby tooth. I understood that the physical discomfort of pulling it would be minimal, but she didn't have that knowledge, and her terror was very real to her. This situation prompted me to reflect on my own childhood experiences with loose teeth. I've made it a guiding principle in my parenting to consciously do the opposite of what my own parents did whenever possible. So I delved into my somewhat hazy childhood memories. I often doubt the reliability of these recollections. I know I've suppressed a lot, details might be altered, and years of hearing my parents' skewed versions of events have made me question my own memory. While I couldn't recall specifics of the pain, I vividly remembered being physically restrained and held down. I remembered the sensation of floss being tied around a tooth and then a sharp tug. The The dominant memories weren't of physical agony, but of intense fear and confusion. In that moment, I found the answer I needed. I picked up my little girl and calmly reiterated that the tooth was hurting precisely because it was so loose and needed to come out to stop the pain. She started crying even harder this time. I simply held her close while she gradually calmed down, and then we talked it through. I made her a solemn promise that I would absolutely not pull the tooth until she felt ready. I suggested we could try eating some firm or chewy foods to see if that might dislodge it naturally. She said it hurt too much to even bite down on anything using that part of her mouth. I gently explained that the only other option was for me to pull it out, and her eyes immediately welled up with tears again. I quickly reaffirmed my promise, assuring her once more that I would not take any action until she was ready to make that choice. She eventually agreed, we sealed the promise with a pinky swear, and she ran off to play, seemingly reassured for the moment. Over the next several hours, she returned to me about half a dozen times, each time seeking reassurance that I would not pull her tooth before she was ready. Each time I calmly repeated my promise and emphasized that this decision was entirely hers to make. After all, I told her it's her body, not mine, and she is in control of it. Approximately 4 hours after her initial tears, my daughter reappeared in front of me. Her face held an expression that was a mixture of fear and determined resolve. She was clutching her favorite stuffed unicorn with an incredibly tight grip. All she said was very quietly, "I'm ready." She then opened her mouth, presenting the wobbly tooth. I gently took the tooth between my thumb and forefinger, and with a single smooth motion it came right out. Her free hand instantly went to her mouth, and after a quick surprised gasp, she exclaimed with pure delight, "I did it!" I mirrored her excitement, telling her how incredibly brave and amazing she was. We rinsed her mouth out and carefully placed her tiny tooth in the special box for the tooth fairy. At that point, I thought the incident was concluded. Much to my profound surprise and immense delight, that was not the end of it at all. My sweet, wonderful girl spent the next 4 full days actively telling anyone and everyone she encountered about how brave she had been and how incredibly proud she was of herself for getting her tooth out. I found myself crying the first time I heard her declare this. At her age, I was being systematically taught that saying or even feeling anything positive about myself was considered bragging. I was indoctrinated with the belief that expressing sentiments like "I'm proud of myself" made me seem like an arrogant, stuck-up brat, and that consequently, no one would ever like me. Even when my parents claimed to be proud of me, which was almost exclusively language used when boasting to other people, never directly communicated to me, it was solely in relation to tangible accomplishments. These were quantifiable achievements like receiving high academic grades, though even that was often framed as simply meeting expectations, winning sports matches, earning music awards, and similar external validations. It was never instilled in me, and frankly the concept never even occurred to me to feel proud of myself simply for who I am as opposed to solely for what I achieve or do. And yet here was my 6-year-old daughter not only possessing an intrinsic understanding of her own worth, but actively utilizing that sense of self-worth to confront and overcome a difficult and frightening challenge. Beyond all of that, she was comfortable enough in her own skin and possessed the confidence required to vocalize her pride in herself and articulate the reason why she felt that pride. I understand that this might seem like a relatively small event, especially to individuals who did not experience the kind of upbringing that many of us in this community did, but for me, it represented an absolutely monumental moment, both for my daughter's development and for my own healing journey. I often feel as though I'm simply navigating parenthood by trial and error, attempting to do my absolute best, but essentially relying on a reverse blueprint, knowing definitively what not to do based on my past, but lacking a clear, positive model of exactly what is right. That process is inherently challenging. It's difficult to have a clear understanding of what constitutes harmful or wrong parenting without having an equally clear vision of the positive alternative. However, this small, seemingly simple anecdote provided me with a powerful affirmation that we are in fact doing something fundamentally right. I know we will never be perfect parents. That's an unattainable standard for anyone. But this experience feels like a significant, positive step in the right direction. And thanks to the profound lesson I learned from my little girl's bravery and self-affirmation, I can now genuinely say that I am proud of myself. I am actively breaking the cycle of intergenerational trauma. I am brave and strong in facing my past and building a different future, and I am proud of myself, not just for what I have accomplished, but for who I am becoming. addressing victim blaming in our trauma support community. It is crucial to remember, first and foremost, that this community serves as a vital support group for individuals who have survived trauma. When engaging with original posters who are reaching out here for support, please refrain from using harsh language or offering overly simplistic, unhelpful advice such as just move out or simply leave. Such comments are not constructive, and I will explain why in detail, so please read on patiently. After outlining what approaches to avoid, I will then provide guidance on more supportive ways to respond, making it important to review the entire message. Approaches to avoid. We are currently observing a concerning trend where many posts describe horrific living situations with parents, yet the comment sections are frequently filled with directives like just leave, move out immediately, or even suggestions about legal action like put your parent in jail. This type of advice makes significant assumptions about the poster's circumstances. It assumes, for instance, that the individual is in a mental and emotional state capable of executing such drastic actions. It also assumes that the parent would not retaliate violently, perhaps even attempting to harm the poster, either after serving a sentence or if legal authorities don't view the situation with the same severity as commenters. Furthermore, this advice presumes that the poster possesses the necessary resources and life skills to become independent. Not everyone is equipped to survive homelessness, and choosing not to attempt it is a perfectly valid decision. Continue reading to understand the complexities involved. Many individuals in these situations have been actively sabotaged by their parents, preventing them from developing the fundamental skills required for independence. This often manifests as parents deliberately hindering their child from obtaining a driver's license, acquiring official identification, succeeding academically in high school, attending college, Some parents go as far as stealing their children's money or essential identification documents like birth certificates and social security cards, deliberately removing the resources needed to leave. Escaping these controlling dynamics is rarely straightforward. In extreme cases, some parents may even pose a lethal threat to their adult children for attempting to leave. Additionally, some members of our community live with disabilities or serious health conditions that necessitate reliance on their parents for caregiving support or health insurance access. This dependency is critical for them to receive necessary medical treatment and simply survive. Others might be staying with parents out of necessity for affordable childcare, as accessible and affordable options are scarce in many places, even if the poster is employed and has transportation. Some individuals remain in abusive homes to protect younger siblings or other vulnerable family members who might not survive the abuse if left alone. There are also posters who are actively working towards gathering the skills or resources needed to leave as soon as possible, but simply haven't completed their preparations yet. Moreover, it is a widely recognized psychological phenomenon that even individuals who possess all the apparent resources to leave an abusive situation often cannot do so immediately. It requires considerable time to fully comprehend that one is being abused, to truly believe and accept their own experiences, and then to muster the strength and resolve to take the concrete steps towards leaving. This process can be even more challenging for people from cultures with strong communal ties, or for those who know that cutting ties with their abuser will likely mean losing all their family connections, and potentially many friendships as well. Judging individuals for struggling with these complex dynamics does not facilitate their ability to leave. Instead, it often makes them feel that even this support group is not a safe space to seek help. This judgment frequently deepens feelings of hopelessness and diminishes their sense of capability, making leaving or even surviving the abuse feel less possible. The moderators of this community genuinely want everyone who needs to escape their abusers to do so as quickly as it is safe and possible. This is the underlying principle behind our policy against victim blaming. When you blame a poster for not having left their abusive situation already, you are engaging in victim blaming. When you tell a poster you can't control others, so you just need to leave, you are engaging in victim blaming. When you pass judgment on posters for enduring the difficult circumstances they are describing, you are engaging in victim blaming. When you ask a poster why they tolerate such treatment, you are engaging in victim blaming, because the poster may genuinely lack better options, or they may be grappling with the well-documented psychological challenges that make leaving difficult for abused individuals, even when resources might seem available. Constructive approaches. So, how do you avoid victim blaming and offer genuine support? The key is to keep the focus squarely on the actions of the abuser. Validate the poster's experiences by affirming that what they are going through is unacceptable and wrong. Offer profound validation. tell the poster emphatically that they did not deserve the abuser's treatment, that what happened to them was not okay, and that their story resonates and you believe them. These kinds of responses are what make people feel truly heard, seen, and empowered. You can gently suggest self-care practices or creating physical or emotional distance, but only if it is safe for the poster to do so. You might softly express hope that they will be able to leave the abuser someday, if that becomes a possibility, while simultaneously conveying your understanding that this isn't always feasible, ensuring absolutely no judgment is implied. Be mindful not to assume that the poster possesses the same skills, resources, or fortunate circumstances that you might have. In many cases, a poster's reaction to a situation differs from how you might respond precisely because their specific situation and circumstances are vastly different from your own. You can delicately suggest exploring options for getting out, but it is vital to tread with extreme caution. Most posters have already considered this possibility extensively. For those who know they are currently unable to leave, your suggestion might feel like just another hurtful comment added to their burden. Posters who are genuinely trapped by a lack of resources, skills, challenging circumstances, or the psychological barriers common in abusive dynamics may feel even more hopeless and less capable of ever leaving. Therefore, keep your suggestions gentle, always remembering that leaving is not a realistic option for everyone. Ensure your language reflects this understanding. In situations where your immediate impulse is to tell the original poster to just leave, take a moment to pause, breathe deeply, examine the assumptions you're making about their situation. Check if numerous other commenters haven't already given the same advice. See if the moderators have already stepped in to address similar comments. Look to see if the poster has perhaps already explained why they cannot just leave at this time. And critically, even if the poster indicates they simply don't feel emotionally ready to leave yet, do not judge them for this. It often takes significant time for individuals to build the internal fortitude required to take that step. Instead, validate the poster's experience, reaffirming that they do not deserve to be abused. Encourage them to practice self-care and perhaps seek therapy, assuming they have access to such resources, as therapy is often prohibitively expensive and inaccessible for many. Encourage them to continue posting here and seeking the support they need. Encourage them to trust their own perceptions when they recognize they are being abused. You can gently encourage them to work towards gathering the resources, resilience, skills, or whatever else is needed to leave, but never assume that this path will be possible for every person. Avoid assuming that individuals who haven't left yet are simply being weak or lazy. Operate from the assumption that the poster is doing the very best they possibly can within their current reality. However, if the poster explicitly states that they simply cannot leave right now, do not pressure them further. In the vast majority of cases, judging a poster for their current inability to leave will only make it less likely that they will ever feel capable of doing so. And always, without exception, remember that this space is fundamentally a support group for survivors. Assure reporting victim-blaming comments. Please, for the sake of maintaining a safe and supportive environment, utilize the reporting function for any comments that violate the rules or engage in victim blaming. You can report any post or comment completely anonymously using the report button located beneath each entry. This action places the reported content into a queue that the moderators review when they are online. Given that this community typically has only a limited number of active moderators on any given day, we heavily rely on user reports. If rule-breaking content isn't reported, it's highly probable that it will go unnoticed and unaddressed, as we simply do not have the capacity to read every single post and comment. Therefore, please do your part and report such content. Thank you for your help in keeping this space safe. It's crucial to remember this community is for support, not judgment. Just leave ignores the deep control and sabotage from narcissistic parents. This mod post is spot on. Realizing my adopted cat shares trauma responses from being raised by a narcissist. I recently adopted the cat belonging to my deceased narcissistic sister. Before he came to live with me, he had spent several weeks confined to a small bathroom with virtually no meaningful social interaction. As a result, he coped with his distress by overeating, leading to him becoming quite overweight. He was subjected to constant yelling and was blamed for every minor inconvenience or accident that occurred. If something broke, if an object fell, if he threw up, if his litter box became dirty simply because he used it, or even if he meowed slightly too loudly, he was the target of her anger. It felt like the poor cat could do absolutely nothing right in her eyes. Since he's been living with me, I've seen a significant improvement in his well-being and his behavior. He's been gradually doing better and becoming much more social and comfortable in his new environment. The other morning, it was breakfast time, and I was in the process of filling his food bowl with his favorite delicious kibble. He was, as usual, extremely excited about his meal. In his eagerness, he couldn't wait patiently and decided to jump up onto a small, rather wobbly table that was positioned nearby. He's a big cat, and the table, being unsteady, easily tipped over under his weight. It was just a tiny table holding only a few loose change coins and some papers. It was genuinely no big deal. Nothing valuable was broken, and it was a minor incident. But his reaction was immediate and profound. He bolted, clearly terrified, and ran to the far corner of the kitchen where he crouched and stared at me intently. In that frozen posture, I could see he was bracing himself, anticipating the familiar onslaught of screaming and perhaps even physical punishment, just as she would have reacted in such a situation. Simultaneously, I found myself freezing in place as well. Growing up, any small accident I made, any minor mistake or spilled item would result in being severely yelled at and sometimes physically punished. My body and mind automatically defaulted to that same state of paralysis, expecting the explosion of rage that I had experienced countless times in my childhood home. I was frozen just like him. There we were, him staring at me from the corner and me standing still, caught in the echoes of past trauma. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then, I consciously took a breath, relaxed my tense posture, and softly asked him if he was okay. The moment I spoke gently and lowered my guard, his fear seemed to dissipate instantly. He immediately ran towards me, rubbing against my legs and purring, seeking affection. He stayed close, watching me calmly pick up the scattered papers and coins from the floor. As I did so, I spoke to him reassuringly, telling him that the table was broken and unstable, and that it wasn't his fault it fell. I know he didn't understand the specific words, but he absolutely understood the tone of my voice in the absence of anger. He knew I wasn't mad at him for what was clearly an accident. In that moment of shared stillness and subsequent relief, I had a powerful realization. Both of us in our own ways had been treated similarly by individuals larger and stronger than us, people who were supposed to provide safety and protection, but instead inflicted fear and blame for minor, unintentional occurrences. We had both developed deeply ingrained fear responses to perceived mistakes. But the cycle stops here. There will be no more yelling, no more blame for accidents. Accidents are a part of life for both humans and animals. We both deserve to be treated with kindness, patience, and understanding rather than fear and punishment. And yes, he absolutely got his delicious breakfast right after our shared moment of healing and understanding. Wow, the way trauma manifests, even in pets, is profound. That shared moment says so much. Have you seen similar trauma responses echoed? Tell us in the comments. The summer my sister took me camping and changed everything. I grew up in a difficult household environment. My father exhibited narcissistic traits, and my mother struggled with borderline personality disorder, frequently disappearing for extended periods for reasons I never fully understood. When I was around 12 years old, I discovered I had a half-sister. She was 17 at the time and lived several hours away in a different town. Her home life also presented challenges, although hers were primarily economic rather than stemming from deliberate neglect or ill will. We began corresponding through letters. In one of my letters, I confided in her about my dread of the approaching long summer holiday. Being confined to the house without even the escape of school felt like an impending hell. She responded with a heartfelt promise to intervene if my situation became unbearable. She wrote, "Just let me know and I'll find a way to help you." A few days after, I had mailed a letter describing how my mother had stopped providing meals and detailing my father's emotional and, at times, physical abuse. My sister unexpectedly arrived at our doorstep. She informed my father that I would be spending the entire summer holiday with her and her family. Given that my father disliked children, including me, he readily agreed without asking any further questions. We boarded a night train heading north, and I was filled with excitement for what I imagined would be a stay at her home. However, she didn't take me to her house. Instead, she took me camping. We spent the entire summer hiking along incredibly beautiful trails, mostly sleeping in a tent, but occasionally renting a small cabin for a night's rest. It was, without exaggeration, the happiest summer of my entire life. Suddenly I had a sister who not only cared about me, but genuinely enjoyed spending time together. She possessed practical skills like fishing and setting traps for birds, she knew how to cook outdoors, and she patiently taught me how to read maps and identify the constellations visible in the night sky. By the time the summer drew to a close, I felt like a completely different person. I was no longer the shy, insecure child I had been. I felt strong and resilient, with a fundamentally new perspective on life and my own capabilities. Upon returning, I reported my parents to the authorities for their lack of adequate parenting. As a result, I was placed with a foster family. Neither of my parents put up any resistance to keeping me, so the transition was surprisingly smooth. I frequently reflect on that transformative summer. I often wonder if the profound change in me was primarily due to gaining a caring sister, or if it was the experience of her showing me that I possessed the inner strength to survive through and even flourish, even when navigating the most challenging unmarked paths. It wasn't until many years later that I finally learned the complete truth behind that summer adventure. At the time she made me that promise, my sister was actually living with her family in an extremely small apartment that had no space whatsoever for an additional person, especially not another mouth to feed. In fact, she herself had been told she needed to move out as soon as possible to make room for her younger siblings and was actively waiting for the day she could move into her student accommodation. Hearing this revelation was astonishing. Not only was our wonderful summer trip an emergency, last resort solution, her desperate but determined way to keep her promise and give me an unforgettable summer amidst her own difficulties, but she had executed it so flawlessly that I, as a 12-year-old, never once suspected that we were out there, because we literally had nowhere else suitable to go. Today I am celebrating my 30th birthday. My sister remains my closest friend and confidant. This coming summer we are planning to hit the trails together once again, revisiting the wilderness that became our sanctuary and the backdrop for my personal transformation. Seriously, that sister is a legend. This is what real family looks like. If you appreciated this video, please like and subscribe and tell me your favorite post below.